All right, welcome everybody to Tuesday Night Book Club. Um, I'm hosting tonight, Candace Anderson, and we are going over The Power of One More by Ed Mylett. So excited. I hope you guys are loving this book as much as I am. So excited that he is going to be speaking live at convention. Even more fun to be prepping this book leading up to convention. So it's going to be awesome. We are going over chapters 4 and 5. Um, so we will go ahead and let me flip to. So chapter 4 is One More and the 5 Principles of Time Management. Now, I ended up swapping times of when I was hosting book club. But I am telling you, every time we have a book club, time is my topic. And if anyone who knows me at all, I am like the keeper of time. And so I'm not sure. It's just too fitting that that's the way it shakes out. But I really do love the way that he breaks down the concept of um, the it's essentially what he's talking about. The difference between clock time versus mind time is what he calls it. And so your clock time is going to be what we all know of, the 60 minutes an hour, 24 hours in a day. It's constant and chronological. Whereas mind time is the perception of that time, and the amount of time that it's taking. And so he says that perception of time is what the speed of time feels like to you. That perceived duration of time is unique to each and every individual. Time is your most valuable asset. And he also talks about, and he breaks down a little bit on page 55, a little bit more about kind of like the biology of like the reality of how our perceived time and that perceived duration does biologically start to change as well. So I thought that that was interesting how he kind of broke that down. But he goes on to talk about the 5 different principles. And so I feel like the idea of perceived time can maybe feel a little hippy dippy or a little hard for some people to wrap their head around. But if you're open to it, you really can start to see the perspective of kind of what it is that he's talking about. And so, principle 1, he talks about adding more days to your day, and the reality of what we can accomplish in this modern day era versus when kind of chronological time evolution began. It's like night and day difference. And I think that in and of itself can help you understand a little bit more about perceived time and kind of understand the concept around the perceived time. But I'm having a difficult time finding where I'm at in my book. Here we go. Um, And so basically, he says to add more days into your day. And I would like to think about that more as like almost time blocking, for lack of better terms, and maybe a more simplified version of that. It's being strategic in aligning your day, and breaking it into chunks. And so that you can be more effective in that window and have kind of a start and end time to it as well. And by doing so, it kind of rolls into then principle number 2, which is to approach time with a greater sense of urgency. Um, we all know that we tend to work more efficiently when we have a looming deadline. Like, let's be real. Like, and he gives good examples of breaking that down. But he talks about your energy within that work, and the energy that you bring to the table when you kind of have that looming deadline. And so if you're intentional about setting your own specific deadlines, you can increase your efficiency in that duration of time. So then that rolls into principle number 3 with learning how to control time versus it controlling you. And really, he talks about the preparation and how you start your days, how you start your day, and the intentions that you set when you wake up and start your day before your feet even hit the ground is really what sets the tone for how you can master your time throughout the day versus allowing your time to control you. Of course, he acknowledges the fact that there's always going to be your one-offs and your oddball things, but that if you're intentional about setting your goals for the day, you can be more in control of how the day proceeds through. Principle number 4, measuring your performance often. Uh, basically, I found it funny, and I didn't even really think about it because I think when you have kind of a goal-oriented mindset or a business or more of an entrepreneurial mindset, which most of us that are here probably think along those lines, having goals and evaluating our work probably seems a little bit more like second nature. So I kind of giggled when I thought about the fact that most people probably do only assess their goals in their life like once or twice a year, i.e., the New Year's crash bandwagon. So, with that being said, he breaks down the importance of having a measuring tool and a measuring system because, like at the top of page 63, if you don't take the time to measure, again, time, if you don't take the time to be intentional about thinking about the work that you've done and measuring the work that you've done, you'll have a more difficult time course correcting. That leads to inefficiency and wasted time. Principle number 5 is focusing on the future. I think that that kind of speaks for itself, but he does go on to break it down. I think the important takeaway from here is that he says don't dwell on the past. The time has gone. The time has already passed. You don't get it back. So do not spend too much time dwelling on maybe the negative things, but he also says don't spend too much time romanticizing on the positive things either. Don't get caught up living in the past. It's important to be present and to be focusing on the future because that is the time that you still have ahead of you to be able to maximize and take advantage of. So with that being said, he rolls into chapter 5, which is one more emotion. Y'all, I'm a sensitive, emotional person, so I was like reading through this chapter and I was like, oh man, oh man. So I thought it was a good check and balance. But he talks about how our lives are directly linked to the quality of our emotions. And he references having an emotional home that you live in. And it's kind of the top emotions that you tend to feel on a regular basis. And I would kind of, so he says, the emotions you choose to fill your home with is the reality of your life. And everyone is conditioned to return to your emotional home. And I thought of that as being very similarly to how he talks about your identity thermostat. I feel like there's almost like an emotional home thermostat, and that without intention, you can experience things, the highs of highs or the lows of lows. But no matter what, you will almost pull yourself back into whatever is most comfortable because that is where your brain is used to being, and your brain likes comfort. It doesn't like things that are different, new, or scary. And so you have a tendency to kind of almost get boxed in. So without intentionality, it is hard to change some of those regular emotions that have become the norm for you. He points out that all emotions serve us one way or another. And so it's important to not perceive any emotion as necessarily good or bad. Um, Society has, as a whole, has kind of coined some of these emotions in positive or negative lights, but they serve a purpose. They all serve a purpose. And so it's having that awareness of why you're having those emotions that will allow you to utilize it for the better, for lack of better terms. So essentially, you can spin negative emotion for the good. Um, so to try not to get hung up on that. Um, I feel like I had one more thing that I wanted to like really touch on when it came to that. So then he kind of goes on to break down things a little bit more. He talks um, about why we hoard our emotions. And he says that the actions that you take, and I would say also, on the contrary, the actions that you don't take in your life are because of perceived notions or particular emotional responses that you will have based off of prior experience. And so I recognize that I will sometimes hold back um, and be limited in the action I take for fear of the potential emotion that I perceive may take place. And so I find myself holding back more so than focusing on the emotions that triggered my actions. But anyhow, um, so we tend to try and hoard only perceived positive emotions. We try to fixate on those again, and he breaks down about how both positive and negative uh, can serve us. And so, oh, I don't know, guys. I'm feeling like I'm hitting a wall in my notes here, and they're not making much sense. So I apologize. But essentially, what I think it comes down to is that it's important for you to take inventory of your emotions. It's that awareness that will help bring clarity. And then once you have clarity on whatever your go-to emotions are, then you can be intentional. He talks about that, about kind of identifying some key 5 or 6 emotions that you want to experience on the regular. Because once you can identify them, it will activate your reticular activating system and your brain will get to work trying to fulfill those emotional needs. So, um, yeah, hey, Enneagram 1. Yes, ma'am. So with that being said, before I blabber on and take on all the time, I would love to hear, I guess, a little bit more about some of your guys' takeaways. Um, your thoughts around time, if it triggered anything for you of how you want to maybe make some shifts in your day-to-day activities. Yeah, floor is open.
All right, well, I guess I'll go really quick. So I wrote down a couple of things really quick. I really liked that like 3-day thing, and I think Leah might share about it a little bit, which will be cool because I'm just curious if anybody has ever done it. Um, I wrote down approach time with more urgency, that talent is driven by urgency, and I thought that that was kind of cool, like just because I actually had a conversation with one of my builders recently, like, and I used the analogy of like really having to go to the bathroom, but you're in line and then you don't even care what you were in line for. All you can think about is how you have to get to the bathroom no matter what. And so I was like, why do you think like that you don't feel an urgency with your IPA like you have to go to the bathroom? So I just really liked that part. Um, I liked the first 30 minutes of like no electronics at all. I think that that's a pretty good like thing in general, no like negative external inputs. Um and then for me personally, like I measure like my plexus stuff often, but I was realizing when reading through this that I don't measure like my other life goals very often. And I was like, I wonder why I don't do that. Slash, like, how can I be more intentional about like other life, stuff outside of Plexus? Um, I really, really liked the stuff about controlling your emotions. I think that's super important, your emotional home. Um, I read something once that I wrote down that I thought was cool to share with you guys. They called it like, what is your favorite flavor as far as like emotion? So if you think of it like ice cream, like what's your like biggest emotional home? So it was like, if let's say anger is your favorite flavor, of feeling or whatever. And so it was that same type of thing, but I like the idea of like really digging out like what are those go-tos that you do and then finding what you want to replace them with. I wanted to ask, I don't know if any like Jules want to share, but I was really curious like how you guys or if you guys measure the other areas of your life outside of Plexus work and how you do that. And then also like I think it would be really cool to hear some Jules's like what are their first 30 minutes of their days usually look like. I think that would be fun to hear. So if anyone wants to say that.
I was going to tell you to share, Grandma. Fearless leader. My days go the best when I do not have my phone right away. I like to not have my phone until 9, 10 o'clock a lot of times, unless I'm doing Plexus in the morning. Then it just kind of depends on what season I'm in. But you asked about like the 3 days thing. I've had different ways that I've done things, and I think you have to be fluid with depending on what season of life you're in, whether you're working or not, how old your kids are, like all those things. I've had seasons of my Plexus business where I felt like I did 3 mini days. So in my first third of the day, I would do Plexus, mom life, and homeschooling. And then I'd kind of reset, give the kids a break, and then I'd do another round Plexus, mom life, homeschooling. Because I had smaller kids and I could not do like big chunks of time for things. You know what I mean? Right now, I'm in a season where I have to do longer chunks of homeschool. So I kind of feel like I have to do like mom, house, wife, that sort of thing. Like that's one chunk, homeschool's one chunk, Plexus is one chunk. But I think like the whole thing, like with him talking about the 3 day thing, like, man, what a gift. We can do that with network marketing where you can live like 3 full lives where you're being super intentional with your time in multiple areas. Like if you're a working mom, you can go work your business or go work your job. Like if you have a day job, you can work your business and you can be a great mom and wife or whatever that looks like for you. Like, I think it's like what he's getting at. It's like an abundance mindset. Like, don't feel like I don't have enough time. Like what did he call that? The mind time thing. Like, if you're thinking that all the time, you're not going to have enough time. And I often feel like, oh my gosh, I don't have enough time to do everything I need to do. And I have to like, nope, God has given me everything that I need to fulfill all these things and wear all these hats. And it's just like having to have that abundance mindset. But yeah, mornings, I do a lot of journaling. I'd be happy to talk to you about that. I don't want to talk too long, but I try to get my mind right, get in the word, do journaling. I try to, like oftentimes I will go through like Plexus stuff and journaling, like even just in my Bible journal and like goals and, you know, limiting beliefs, like a lot of limiting belief stuff. Like I get it all out then, those trapped emotions, that kind of stuff. Like I just kind of try to process all of that before my kids get up, before I get into my phone, before I get faced with something where I would have those negative thoughts and comparison or, whatever. So yeah, don't look at your phone first thing for sure. Get in your Bible, do some journaling.
Well, a couple thoughts from the chapters. He mentions that when the goal is further away, you jog towards the goal, but when it's right in front of you, it's a sprint. So I think a great example of that living out in our business is oftentimes what people have coined a magic week, which is the last week of the month. And, how often can you, scramble last second to try and hit a goal and you're working your butt off and all the things when, the urgency wasn't there earlier in the month. And I'm speaking from personal experience. So, I think utilizing this chapter as a reminder, if we break off our time. He says break that even daily into 3 parts in a day. But if we apply that also to like, hey, we're setting goals for be it daily, be it for the first week to think of, okay, I want to get this many joins within my first week. And you treat that as a magic week, the first week, and the second week as its own separate week, and so on and so forth. How much more would we get done working intentionally and with urgency in that sense versus if you're anything like me, like in college, I'd be the one the night before at midnight finishing or writing my paper because it was due finally the next day. It's not that they assigned it at midnight the night before. It's because, you're waiting to the end. So I think that's extremely valuable. But also, um, speaking on the emotions, and I think what he mentioned between, from negative to positive and not seeing it as one or the other. I mean, you see the good harnessed when, I know Fallon's talking about this. I know Emily's talking about this, being in a business and feeling, the stress or the desperation or the whatever because of external life things, and needing to work. Leah's talked about this. And you can harness that for so much good in creating change in your life and creating good in the people around you and in yourself. So being able to use what, those emotions, whatever it may be, if we're not coining them as negative, they don't have to be. I agree with that, but only when we can use that for good, use it for bettering ourselves or for change or for fueling us or whatever that may be. And finally, he mentions you can reframe jealousy as a good thing when you're able to view it as an achieved goal for you too. I have seen so many times over the past decade of doing this business where people see other people ranking up or having wins or having the joins, and it can do two things to a certain kind of person. It can either shut them down and they don't want to be around it, they don't want to see it, they don't want to be in the chat, they don't want to, they turn the other way, they think like they're jealous or they're mad or whatever, and it shuts them down. Or on the other person, it can fire them up, it can fuel them, they can see, hey, that's what's possible, hey, if they can do it, I can do it too. And it's a completely different effect. So that right there is what, the best thing you can do is use what you see other people doing, be around the people who are winning. Don't run away from them, don't shy away from them, be around them, because that can lay you up, and it's a choice. It can lay you up and it can fuel you. So be that second person, don't be that first person who it shuts them down.
Thank you, Jamie. I was starting to type in here too, and I just can't type fast enough and spell correctly. Lordy. And I think some of what you're talking about there comes down to then emotional maturity within the emotions, and to be able to have that discernment, to be able to recognize and use that emotion to serve you and to serve you well.
To piggyback off of that just a little bit, so we talk a lot about belief, positive emotions, driving yourself towards goals, and getting yourself close to the fire, and that is so, so important. And I think that we've also talked about how we are cognizant that there are sometimes seasons when it comes to these kinds of things, and you may not feel as positive as you had been in the past. So, one of the things that I have learned about and have tried to be intentional about is, rather than falling all the way and tipping the scales all the way to negative, just trying to stay neutral. Yeah, I think sometimes we live in a very dichotomous world where we feel like everything's either good or everything's really bad, rather than, okay, if it's not all good right now, that's okay, but I don't necessarily want to slip into another extreme. An example, might be if I got up tomorrow morning, I said, I have to go to work today. And, we try to strive to say, like, I get to go to work today, but, I might not be there in the morning. So it's just, I'm going to work today, and so, I think, again, showing that kind of, or striving for that emotional maturity in that sense of knowing where your thermostat is, like you were talking about, Candace, and just sometimes just trying to keep yourself just from tipping too much into the extremes, and just trying to keep yourself from losing yourself too far from your goal in that sense.
I did really like at the end when he talks about getting honest and intentional behind with your emotions. At the bottom of page 75, he kind of, this whole section is talking about, again, almost that emotional maturity of like appreciating and living in the moment and appreciating the hard and the challenge for what it is, while being grateful for the good, so that when you get to the end of the road, if you will, when you get to the end of the goal, you like who you are, and you like where you're at, and you like the person you've grown and become in the process. It's the hard work that you did that matters, that makes that goal worth achieving, rather than, and he says, like, you see it all the time. You see people who get to the end of the line who check that box and are expecting the box to have made this miraculous difference. And then in the end, because they didn't work on the things that they needed to work on through the process and grow in the process, they get to that box and still feel empty and still feel not fulfilled. And so being honest with yourself is the springboard from which every emotion emanates. And intentionality is the muscle you need to get you to those honest emotions.
I think that ties back into the other week when he talked about how you're not defined by your accomplishments. Like, that's not who you are. So many people are like, oh, if I accomplish this sales goal, this whatever, I'm going to be magnificent. Well, they're separate things, and people forget that all the time. So I think it just reiterates that point.
You're not your accomplishment, good or bad. Well, friends, we are rounding the corner of being up on a half hour. I love having everybody on tonight. We had such a good crowd. It was so good to have you all here. Any last thoughts before we wrap it up? All right, friends. Well, we will come back next week with chapters 6 and 7. Have a good week, y'all. Happy April. Happy April 1st.